Good evening. Particularly good over here. Well, tonight, as I promised, we're going to be talking about how there's no truth to human evolution from primates, from apes, etc. And I'm going to show you how to debunk the whole thing. It's just so easy to do. But you will recall that evolutionists claim that we evolved from apes. Now, the first reason is because obviously we have a very similar design pattern. And so that's why they choose to do that. But technically, actually, they don't think we came from apes. Charles Darwin actually said we came from monkeys. Now, the evolutionists will deny that. They will say, oh, no, he meant apes. Well, I don't know what he meant, but I read his book, and he said monkeys. But let's just start taking a little look at how you can debunk this whole idea that people evolved from some kind of primate, okay? When evolutionists attempt to convince you that we evolved from apes, they use this terminology, quote, the road to man, unquote. That's a terminology they've been using for decades. Supposedly the road that apes took to become people, right? And you'll notice that I have the 3 question marks after that. So, quote, the road to man, unquote, question mark, question mark, question mark. So what we're looking at tonight is, quote, the road to man, unquote. Really? Come on. The road to man, really? So think with me for just a moment. Does this look familiar to you at all? I want you to know that these iconic images have been used by evolution since 1960 to deceive people into believing that that people evolved from apes. Now, first of all, when you look at this presentation, I want you to think about this. When you see this, it does have a certain plausibility. It does have a certain logic. Would you agree? I mean, just being honest, when you see this, there's a certain logic, a certain plausibility that you'd start with a small one and then get bigger and bigger and bigger, correct? But remember that simply because something is logical or something is plausible does not necessarily make it true. And I have a question for you. When you see this presentation, which does have a certain logic and plausibility to it, has you ever thought about this? When they show you this, why don't they show you that? Oh, come on, folks. You see that little fish walking out of the water? Yeah. You have to remember that while they think we came from apes, they think the apes came from fish that walked out of the water. Well, why don't they ever show you that? Could it be because if you saw that, you'd go, wait a minute. Right? Absolutely. Yeah, actually, this is magic. Now, when I say it's magic, it's not black magic. It's stage magic. This is illusion to deceive you into believing that people evolved from apes. And when evolutionists attempt to claim that people evolved from apes, they will show you 4 categories of physical evidence. The 4 categories are shown here. Now, the first one up here, well, this is the drawing of the skull fragments of Piltdown Man. Piltdown Man. Now, this is called the proof by hoaxes. We'll talk about that in just a second, but let me just illustrate. So there's the proof by hoaxes using the illustration of Piltdown Man's skull and jaw. Then here, the tooth of what's called Nebraska Man. This category is called the proof by misrepresentations. Misrepresentations. Then down here, the third category, this is the skull of an Australopithecine, so Australopithecus. But this is the proof category, the bones of dead apes. And then you have the 4th category shown here by the skull of this Neanderthal. And this proof category is called the proof by the bones of dead people. And so evolutionists use hoaxes, misrepresentations, the bones of dead apes, and the bones of dead people. So those are the 4 proof categories of physical evidence. And we're going to debunk all of those. Now tonight I'm going to be using some big scientific words, but I love taking big scientific words and breaking them down into 2 bits. Hello?
We're glad.
I love it. I really do. But for instance, this big old word, Australopithecus, what does that really mean? Well, the word austral, that's just the ancient word for southern. Southern. For instance, Australia is southern land. The aurora australis are the southern lights. You're familiar with the borealis, the northern lights, but the southern lights as well. And so austral just means southern. And pithecus is just the ancient word for ape. So technically, this word Australopithecus simply means dead southern ape. See how simple that is? Come on, this is simple, right? Now, why are they called dead southern apes? It's really quite simple. When we first found them, they were dead. Y'all need more caffeine. And the first of these apes were found in Africa by Europeans, and so they were the bones of dead southern apes from the perspective of where the people lived that found them. So that's how the name came into existence. And let's start debunking these. Now, first of all, I'm going to take it out of order because if we debunk the one first, it just takes a couple of minutes. We don't have to talk about the rest of tonight. Let's talk about the misrepresentations. Now, the tooth of Nebraska man was actually found in 1917 by a farmer, but in 1922, it was declared to be the tooth of a, supposed pre-human, subhuman, living in the center of the United States, what's now the state of Nebraska, but it was to represent the tooth of a subspecies, pre-species, so forth, of humans. However, in 1922, when this tooth was found, an illustrator for the Illustrated London News actually drew what he looked like. He drew this representation of Nebraska man. I've never figured out whether that's the wife or a friend. I've never figured that one out. But also his horses, his camels, and his club from one tooth. Come on, folks, ain't that good?
That's fantastic.
Come on, you got to admit that's pretty good. One tooth and you can get all that information out of it. The only problem was, 5 years later, in 1927, it was discovered that it was not the tooth of an extinct species of pre-human or subhuman. It was, in fact, the tooth of an extinct species of pig. Therefore, this is the tooth of porcine man. Okay, he was a real porker. Okay? But what is a misrepresentation? Well, the tooth was real. It wasn't a fake, a fraud, a hoax, or anything like that. The tooth was real, but it was misrepresented to begin with as that of a pre-human, and then later corrected because it was the tooth of an extinct species of pig. So that's misrepresentations. That's all you need to know about those, okay? So let's go back to proof category number 1, Piltdown Man. Now, the fragments of Piltdown Man were found in 1912, 1913 in deep southeast England near Canterbury Cathedral. And they were declared to be supposed proof of human evolution. And these fragments represented a pre-human, subhuman living at some time in the distant past in what's today deep southeast England. And the fragments were taken to the British Museum of Natural History in London, declared to be proof of human evolution, correct? Now, we're going to talk about this guy a little bit. First of all, this is a drawing of the skull fragments. Now, in 1923, evolutionists already knew this was a hoax. So the fragments were found in 1912, 1913, taken to the British Museum of Natural History, and by 1923, they already knew it was a hoax. Now, why is that? Well, first of all, under examination, the jaw is not human. It is that of a 10 to an 11-year-old orangutan, died about 500 years ago, and probably from Borneo. Could be Java, but probably Borneo. The teeth. The teeth are not human. The teeth are actually fossil chimpanzee teeth. And under nothing more than a 10x magnifying lens, you can actually see where they have been filed down flat with a modern metal file to make them look more human-like in appearance. You can also see repairs that have been made in the teeth. And if you do not believe me, I am going to show you the pictures to prove it. The skull is human, but it has a blow from a modern pickaxe at the back of the skull here. Today we now know it's a human that died of bubonic plague, taken out of a medieval graveyard. So what do we actually have here? We have a chimpanzee jaw, fossil chimpanzee teeth, and a human skull. It's a hoax. Now, what is a hoax? It means It's a fake. It's man-made. It's tain't real. Hello? Y'all are familiar with tain't real, right?
It's a deliberate hoax.
Oh, it's a deliberate hoax. I think that's a very good way of putting that, sir. Actually, I live in Orlando, Florida. There's a community a little bit to the east of us called Chiliota. It's an ancient Indian name. And we actually have a community of 6 homes in between the two, and they have a sign that says taint. So this community is called Taint because it taint in Orlando and it taint in Chiliota. Hello? But let me show you the actual pictures. Now, here you see the orangutan jaw. You see the chimpanzee teeth. But notice how absolutely flat those molars are because they've been filed down with a modern metal file. Now, evolutionists at the British Museum of Natural History knew this was a hoax in 1923. You know, if I was in a college class, I would say that better be God.
We're in church, it is God.
Good point. I used to have a good point too, but I had hair to cover it at the time. Anyway, but they knew it was a hoax in 1923, but they didn't tell the public it was a hoax until 1953. They waited 30 years to tell the public that this was a hoax. Don't you love the integrity of evolutionists? And there's 2 men I would like you to remember their names, at least for the evening. The 2 men are Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, Jesuit priest, and Dr. Davidson Black, M.D. These 2 men were involved with the hoax at Piltdown. But I'd like you to remember those names, okay? Teilhard de Chardin, Jesuit priest, and Dr. Davidson Black, M.D. And just as a review, this is a medieval human skull. It is about a 500-year-old orangutan jaw and fossil chimpanzee teeth. This is a hoax. Now, with that in mind, let's continue. How do evolutionists like to prove the evolution of anything? And I mean anything. Well, this chart illustrates how they do it. Now, in this chart, please understand, this is not a creationist chart. This comes from an evolutionary source. I'm not afraid to use evolutionary material because I can always use it to prove creation. But this illustrates their favorite method of proof, but it is the second worst method of proof in science. And so what do they do? Well, tonight we're taking a look at human evolution, supposedly, correct? So what do evolutionists do? What they do is they will take various skulls. They will take the skull of a gibbon, the skull of a chimpanzee, the skull of an orangutan, the skull of a gorilla, the skull of a human. And as illustrated up here, they will make the most meticulous measurements you've ever seen in your life. They will measure everything that can be measured, and then they will measure it 6 times. Hello? And they make it look incredibly scientific here, right? But once they do that, what do? They arrange them by size and shape. This is called the proof by ranking. R-A-N-K-I-N-G, ranking. Now, what does it mean to rank something? It means to put it in a logical order or a logical sequence. So the proof by ranking, it's their favorite method of proof, but it's the second worst method of proof in science. Now, again, this is a totally evolutionary source. I don't agree with anything up here. You know that if you were here last night. But in the middle here is a key or legend identifying what each of these skulls down here is supposed to represent. Now, the gorilla skull right here, that's just there for comparison. It's not a part of the series. But in the series, A through F. So we go from A through F, correct? And you can see that they're arranged by size and shape, right? Bigger and so forth. Now, let's take a look. What is skull A supposed to be? Well, skull A is supposed to be Australopithecus, supposedly 500,000 to 1 million supposed years old. So that's dead southern ape, right? Now, B is Pithecanthropus erectus, supposedly 200 to 500,000 years old. C is Homo sapien, supposedly 100 to 200,000 years old. D is Neanderthal, supposedly 50 to 100,000 years old. E is Homo sapien variety Neanderthaliensis, supposedly 50,000 years old, and F is modern Homo sapiens. However, I would like to ask you a question. Do any of you remember being taught in school about Pithecanthropus erectus? High school, college, nobody remembers Pithecanthropus erectus? Okay. Well, first of all, what does the word mean? Well, pitha is the ancient word for ape. Anthropos, the ancient word for man. Anthropology is the study of man. And erectus means walks upright. So technically the name means the ape man who walks upright. See how simple this stuff is if you just break it down, right? I told you I love doing this sort of thing. But none of you have heard about it, okay? Is that right? Okay, well, first of all, I want to also point out something else. When you study your Bibles, you are studying about the life of the Theanthropos. The Theanthropos. Now, who is the Theanthropos? Well, in Greek, theos means God. Theology is the study of God, correct? Anthropos is man, and anthropology the study of man, correct? So who is the Theanthropos? He is the one who is 100% God and 100% man. That's Jesus Christ. He is the Theanthropos. But if you haven't heard of Pithecanthropus erectus, or you can't remember, how many of you would remember him by his common name, which is Java Man? Anybody remember Java Man? A few of you are kind of shaking your heads yes and so forth. Java Man. And we're not talking about Starbucks here, you know. Oh, dear. Y'all do need more caffeine. Maybe Starbucks would be a good idea. But nonetheless, Java Man is the common name for this creature. So let's just talk for a moment about Java Man. Now, Java Man, originally called Pithecanthropus erectus, the ape man who walks upright, is now referred to as Homo erectus, or man that walks upright. But was made from a few teeth, a single skull cap found in 1891 along the banks of the Solo River in Java, Indonesia. They were found under the leadership of the Dutch anatomist Dr. Eugene Dubois, MD. Now, Dr. Dubois was a student being mentored by a German evolutionist named Dr. Ernst Haeckel. Now, on the table, I have on the video about carbon-14, I have a freebie biography on Haeckel. You may not have heard of his name before, but you really do want to know about him. He is arguably the third most important evolutionist of the 1800s behind Charles Darwin and Thomas Huxley. So Ernst Haeckel would be like number 3. This is a guy who, although born in a German Lutheran home, was never a Christian. It was just a, cultural Lutheran. He did earn a PhD, and he did teach at Jena University. But this was a guy who believed in evolution and taught it. As a matter of fact, he was such an evolutionist that he invented things to prove evolution. In my book, I go through that, and in the video I do too. But he invented things. For instance, I'm sure all of you remember embryonic recapitulation, correct? Come on, that was just on the tip of your tongue when you came in, right? Embryonic recapitulation? Oh, well, maybe some of you would remember it by ontology. Ontogeny begets phylogeny. Anybody remember that one? A couple of people are kind of saying, maybe, I'm not sure. Well, the idea was, and he made these drawings. Now, I'll bet you do remember the drawings. If you don't, I've got them in my book. But he is the one who said that initially we are all the same in our mother's womb, but that we go through the evolutionary stages of our development in our mother's womb. And so for humans, he said that we all start off as basically as a jellyfish. And then we turn into a fish, and then an amphibian, and then a reptile, and then a mammal, and you are only born human. And maybe you've seen these illustrations. It's absolutely not true. No embryologist believes it's true. It was debunked a century ago. But that's what he promoted, the idea that we went through our evolutionary, the recapitulation, that we went through the various stages of our evolutionary past while we were in our mother's womb. And he had these illustrations. We all look alike as embryos, but we only differentiate and so forth later. Not true. he came up with various other frauds as well. Now, I know you are not going to believe this, but 120 years ago or so forth, back in the late 1800s, scientists could actually go around and rent lecture halls, put up posters, and sell tickets to people to get them to come and listen to the scientist actually teach. See, I know you were never going to believe that, right? That people would actually pay to go hear a scientist at night. So, yeah, and so think about it. He would actually go around Germany, putting up these posters, renting these lecture halls, and he was teaching German blue-collar workers evolution. Another fraud that he came up with this, which was Pithecanthropus alalis. Now, Pithecanthropus alalis means the speechless ape man. And he came up with that because according to Charles Darwin, Thomas Huxley, Ernst Haeckel, the only difference between apes and us was that we could speak and they couldn't. And although, interestingly enough, he was a very good artist, it's interesting, very rare to have a scientist, PhD, and also be a very good artist at the same time. But his works still sell for significant money, mostly because of his historical aspect. But he was actually a very good artist. But he didn't do this. He actually hired an artist to draw a drawing of the male, the female, and the baby of Pithecanthropus alalis. Now, remember he's German, okay? And he knows his audience. So first of all, in this drawing, the man has his back turned to the audience slightly with his arms raised up here, and he's looking back over his shoulder at the audience, right? Just kind of imagine, you know? So there's this big guy, his arms are up, and then his head is tilting back and looking at the audience, right? He's got enough hair for 3 gorillas. Hello? And a handlebar mustache on his face. You know the German handlebar mustache? The woman is sitting down, holding the baby, and has a very long, rather horse-like face. You can't tell anything about the baby, you just see the top of the head. But he said that this was the creature from which all Germans, indeed all Europeans, had evolved from. To this day, we have never found one piece of physical evidence to support that such a creature even existed. He just made it up. And he has also invented 2 other great frauds, 2 great hoaxes. This is the kind of guy he was, okay? Now, Dr. Dubois was a student of Dr. Haeckel, and they believed in evolution. Now, Dr. Haeckel believed in evolution before Charles Darwin wrote his most famous book, but in 1859, when Darwin published Origin of the Species, it became an instantaneous, New York Times bestseller, and it was immediately reprinted time after time, and was then translated into various European languages. Once it had been translated into German, Dr. Haeckel read it, and he went from being an evolutionist who was quite willing to make up frauds to a militant evolutionist. Now, Dr. Dubois is Dutch. Now, remember in those days we had what's called the Dutch East Indies, now today Indonesia, but back in those days it was the Dutch East Indies, right? And Dr. Dubois is Dutch. And the 2 of them believe in human evolution. And so Dubois says, well, if I go to Indonesia, I will find the proof of human evolution. And Dr. Haeckel gives him his blessing. Now, I would like to challenge you in your Christian belief. Just how committed are you? Because Dr. Dubois so believed that if he went to Java, back in those days, the Dutch East Indies, he so believed that if he went there, he would find the proof for human evolution, the missing link, as was called. And he was so committed, being a medical doctor, that he volunteered to be a doctor in the Dutch army to get a free ticket to Indonesia. Ah, come on, folks, that's commitment. Hello? Now, he'd gone there to find the missing link. He arrives in 1887, 4 years later, in 1891, he says he's found the missing link, right? Now, I thought it might be interesting for you to take a look at the quality of his archaeological team, okay? His archaeological team consisted of 2 Dutch engineers, prison convict laborers, and 2 Dutch army corporals to watch the prisoners. Come on, aren't you impressed? What a team. This is really science, isn't it? Well, he finds these things in 1891, and he wants to tell his mentor, Dr. Haeckel, back in Germany, that he has found it. He's found the missing link, right? Now remember, this is 1891, correct? Now, I know you're not going to believe it, especially the younger ones over here, but in 1891, they didn't have cell phones. Seriously. They barely had phones in Indonesia in 1891. He has to send a telegram. Anybody remember telegrams? Let me tell you something about communism. When I got to Russia in 1994, they were still using telegrams because they didn't have phones to do it. However, he's sending a telegram halfway around the world, and they charge you per character. Okay, so it's expensive to send a telegram halfway around the world. So it's rather cryptic. But he's telling Dr. Ernst Haeckel, Eureka, I have found it, right? Now, Dr. Haeckel wants to congratulate his student, and so he sends a short telegram back. Again, very expensive to do this. I thought maybe you might be interested. Dr. Haeckel telegraphed back to Dubois, and I quote, "From the inventor of Pithecanthropus to his happy discoverer." I'm sorry, did you just hear what I just read? Yes, from the inventor of Pithecanthropus to his happy discoverer. Dr. Haeckel had made up the name. He sent Dubois out there to find the evidence. Right? And Dr. Dubois forgot to... You remember how the English had forgotten to tell anybody that Piltdown was a hoax for 30 years? You remember that? You're going to find out evolutionists love 30 years. So Dr. Dubois forgot to tell the world about a few things. But to fill you in, Dr. Dubois had found a large ape-like skull cap. Today we think giant gibbon. He had found 3 teeth, but 1 was human and the other 2 were orangutan. He did find a human thigh bone, as illustrated here, 50 feet away, but that was 2 years later in 1892. He also forgot to tell anybody that 1 year later in 1890, he had found 2 totally normal human skulls at the same location. I'm telling you this. He admitted it in 1921, shortly before he died. But think about it. He took 30 years before he finally admitted the truth. Is that right? It's like I said, evolutionists just love 30 years. And don't you love the integrity, right? Well, let's go on. Again, let's go back to this chart. Let's take a look again at what we have here. Now, first of all, A is dead southern ape, correct? We agree with that. But think with me. Pithecanthropus, Pithecanthropus erectus is a creature that never existed. It's a hoax. And so this skull does not belong there. Is that correct? Now, C is Homo sapien, but the last time I looked, that's us. And D, Neanderthal. Well, Neanderthals are just Homo sapien. They've always been claimed to be Homo sapiens since the 1850s when they were first found, so that's just us. And then, of course, E is Homo sapien variety neanderthaliensis, which, of course, would just be us. And F is modern Homo sapien, which most assuredly is us. Is that correct? So here we have 1 dead southern ape, something that never existed, and 4 people. How y'all doing? Hello? See, I can make dry bones funny. See, when I said I'm going to teach about dry bones, some of you thought I was going to teach out of Ezekiel, didn't you? Well, let's continue. I'm going to show you some pictures. Now, this comes from, notice the source, Stones and Bones from the Los Angeles, California Unified School District. Now, I find these photographs scary. And I mean that. I really do. First of all, take a look at what you see. here, and this, I'm only going to show you two of these. There's a whole series, but I just want to show you two to illustrate a point. This is the skull of, well, the common name Peking man, but actual Sinanthropus pekinensis, which actually means Chinaman from Peking. And you may remember the capital of China used to be Peking, now it's Beijing, right? But it used to be Peking. So Sino, that's like Shanghai, it means China, man from Peking, okay? Now, I find these actual photographs I'm going to show you, I find them very, very scary. I'm not afraid of the skulls. Doesn't bother me a bit. What does make me concerned is the following. Here's this picture. It comes from a series called Stones and Bones, used in Los Angeles, California, correct? This series is used to teach elementary school children that they evolved from apes. That's what I find scary. And does anybody here have a problem with me showing you the skull of Sinanthropus pekinensis or China? Anybody have a problem with that? No? You should. You should. Let me explain about Peking men. After World War I was over, evolutionists went 1923 to China, got permission from the government to go out and dig in caves not too far outside of the capital. The work would continue until 1937, when it had to be stopped because of the Japanese invasion of Manchuria. But, let's just take a little look. Now, ladies and gentlemen, do you see that on the right? Those are not the bones of Peking man. Those are simply casts or models, all right? But please tell me, that's all they found. Does that look like this?
No.
Excuse me? No. Oh, so that doesn't look like that, is that correct? That's because that's a man-made fake. And then they photographed it. But the actual bones that were found truly look like that. And let's talk about this discovery. I mentioned 1923, 1937. Well, Davidson Black and Teilhard de Chardin traveled to China together. Remember, these are the guys from Piltdown Man? And they arrived there in 1926. It's Davidson Black who gave it the name Chinaman. The work had to be stopped in 1937 because of the invasion of Manchuria. But fellow evolutionists around the world appealed to Davidson Black, and they said, oh, you cannot allow these precious bones to fall into the hands of the advancing Japanese army. You must allow them to come out of China for safekeeping, right? In 1941, the bones were photographed, carefully packaged up, put on the dock, and promptly lost. They have never been seen again. The original bones are not available. They were completely lost. And, again, in 1926, they visited the same site. It is now commonly accepted that they salted both locations. Don't you love the integrity of evolutionists? But today, Peking man, well, he's reclassified as Homo erectus. Do you remember how Java man was reclassified as Homo erectus, right? Well, now Peking man is also reclassified as Homo erectus, even though we don't even have any bones. Hello? Now, what you're going to find out is that evolutionary anthropologists, they have a circular filing cabinet. You know what I mean by circular filing cabinet? You know, a garbage can, right? They have this garbage can called Homo erectus. And every time they find some evidence that they think might have anything to do with human evolution, but can't prove it directly, they throw it into this circular filing cabinet called Homo erectus. Well, let's continue. Here's the second skull I want to show you from that series. Now, like I said, there was a whole series of them. I'm not going to bother with that. But this has a French name because it is a Neanderthal from France. Now, Neanderthals were first found in Germany, but more were found in France and various other places. We're going to talk about that. But you've all heard of Neanderthal. Now, first of all, in German, Neanderthal means tall valley. Neander was the last name of a guy. Now, I don't know, any of you here involved with the music ministry? Anybody? No? Nobody here involved with music ministry? Oh, well, I was going to point out, his name was Joachim Neander. He was a writer of Christian hymns. And in his valley, there was a cave. And in that cave, we found the first bones of Neanderthals. So it's his valley, and that's how the name came to be. But let's talk about Neanderthals. Certainly you are familiar with people saying, oh, these are pre-human, subhuman, etc., correct? And you hear a lot about supposedly they even intermixed with humans. And today you hear news about, well, we all have a fragment of DNA that comes from Neanderthals. I mean, you hear that in the news and so forth, right? Well, let's talk about the truth concerning Neanderthals. Now, I apologize because I'm going to show you a map. It's the newest one I can find, but it's not quite up to date. But today we have found slightly over 400 remains of individual Neanderthals. Now, they're not all complete. You know, we found a partial skeleton of one here and a partial skeleton of that. You rarely find complete skeletons, but we have found slightly over 400 individuals at this point. But they were first found in Germany in 1856. Now, this map is the newest map I can find, but it's not exactly complete, and I'm going to explain the latest discovery. But they were first found in Germany, but more in France. They have been found in Portugal, Spain, northern Italy, in the Adriatic. They have been found in Israel. We have found Neanderthal fragments at the foot of Mount Hermon in northern Israel. They've also been found east of the Caspian, east of the Black Sea, and then east of the Caspian, then into central Russia. Now, I'm going to complete the map for you. Can any of you see this white object here that kind of looks like a banana standing on end? Can you make that out? The projector here is pretty good. So can you see that right there? That is Lake Baikal. Lake Baikal. 3.5 years ago, I was walking on it. Well, it's easy to walk on Lake Baikal when there's 10 inches of ice. Hello? But Lake Baikal is the largest body of fresh water in the world. It has more water in that one lake than all of the freshwater lakes on the surface of this earth. More than all the Great Lakes taken together, etc. You cannot see one end from the other, but you can see one side from the other. I have ministered on both sides of it. As a matter of fact, the last time I came out of Russia, I was just on the west side of it in the city of Engarsk. But, that's Lake Baikal. It is absolutely beautiful. It is a world treasure. But just east of the Baikal, as it's referred to, about here, is the city of Chita. Chita. Now, I have ministered in Chita twice. Wonderful little city. But the most recent Neanderthal remains have been found just outside of Chita. So we now know that Neanderthals went all the way from the Atlantic, all the way across Europe, across Eurasia, almost to the Pacific. So they didn't just live in Germany. Are you with me? And I think it is a little hard to think of Neanderthals as pre-human or subhuman, frankly, because you see, they had a brain on average 13% larger than ours today. Now, if their brains were 13% larger on average than ours, I have a problem believing they are subhuman or pre-human. How about you? And DNA. We have found the DNA in a finger bone and a tooth root from Neanderthals, and we now know they are 99.7 to 100% genetically identical. They are humans. And to point that out, today humans vary. We don't all have the same amount of DNA. Humans vary as much as 4.5% in the DNA content. So that is well within the range of human variation. Are you with me?
Yes.
They're human. And they're mentioned in the Bible. If you have your Bibles with you, would you please open it up to Genesis chapter 10. Genesis chapter 10. You want to take a look at verse 3. Genesis chapter 10, verse 3. Do you see a word there, Ashkenazi? Ashkenazi. You see that word? That is the word that is the ancient word for Germany. Who are the Ashkenazi? They are one of the 70 people groups that came from the Tower of Babel. in this case migrating to what is today north-central Germany. They lived in caves for probably about 200 years. That's all the artifacts would support. And they were learning how to live in a new environment. So they lived in the caves, yes, for a couple of hundred years, and then it went out and established European civilization, yes. But, that may be the story you've heard. Let's fill in the details. Remember that Neanderthals, they had language, they had art, they had music, they made jewelry. They were religious. They buried their dead in religious graves. Do you start to see human activity here? But now let me fill in a little bit more, because we now know they were hunter-gatherers. They did do that. But they were not just hunter-gatherers. In 2015, we found that they were farmers. So they were not just hunter-gatherers, they were also farmers. Then, 2 years later, 2017, we found out that they knew how to make a very sophisticated birch bark adhesive. This is a major technological increase, because without this kind of adhesive, you can't make arrows and spears. And so developing this very sophisticated adhesive is a major technological advancement. Have no doubt about it. Then, in 2020, we found out they also built houses. They didn't just live in caves. They also had houses. They farmed, they hunted, they gathered. They did everything a human being could do. And let's face it, these are the ones that most people think of when you think of cavemen or cave women. Hello. Come on, we want to be inclusive here. Cavemen and cave women, correct? But they did everything that they would do that are human, and indeed had a bigger brain. They were stockier. Men averaged about 5'9", the women about 5'7", and they were incredibly strong. And they were very smart. And so Neanderthals are not subhuman or prehuman, they are humans, period. They simply have an ethnic appearance, just as everybody in this room has an ethnic appearance. And of course, I mentioned cavemen and cave women. Now, first of all, I said that they lived in caves for about 200 years. That's all the artifacts would support. But if you think about it, in north-central Germany, living in a cave is really a very intelligent thing to do. You know, they're cool in the summer, they're warm in the winter, and they are incredibly cheap to build. Right? And of course, one of those questions that I always get from people that are not familiar with the material, they say, well, you know, are cavemen, cave women mentioned in the Bible? Well, of course, cavemen and cave women are mentioned in the Bible. Think with me for a moment. There is nothing that is prehistoric. God starts history with day one. Is that correct? There is no such thing as prehistoric. Everything is historic. And cavemen and cavewomen are mentioned in the Bible. Now, I'm going to help you, but all you have to do is get a concordance, and you can fill in the rest. But are they? Yes. There are 31 references in the Bible to men and women living in caves. And just to give you some help, Lot and his daughters in Genesis 19. The 5 Amorite kings in Joshua 10. That in the book of Judges, the children of Israel lived in the caves. Is that correct? And if you read your Bibles, remember, Samson lived in a cave in Judges 15. Now, Samson was a judge of Israel, and he lived in a cave. So doesn't that qualify Samson as a caveman? Oh. And what about the great prophet Elijah, 1 Kings? He lived in a cave. We even think we know the cave that he lived in. Now, I admit there was no brass plaque there when we found it, but we even think we know the cave that he lived in. And so doesn't that qualify the great prophet Elijah as a caveman? Is that right? What about Obadiah's 100 prophets in 1 Kings 18? What about the men of Israel at Michmash in 1 Samuel 13? And do I not seem to remember King David lived in a cave?
Yes.
Is that right? So doesn't that qualify King David as a, come on guys, caveman, is that right? And you can find more if you just get out of concordance. So cavemen and cavewomen are definitely biblical. Hello? I want to talk about this proof by ranking. Does the proof by ranking really prove anything? It is the second worst method of proof in science, but is their favorite method of proof. I don't care what it is. I don't care if you're talking about the evolution of roses, dinosaurs, people, birds, it doesn't matter. It is their favorite method of proof. And I'm going to show you how to debunk it. I mean, for just a second, remember, if you believe in evolution, you believe that roses and butterflies are related. Hello? Now, this proof by ranking. You see it in textbooks all the time. You might see it in a museum in certain places. But it means to line things up in a logical order or a logical sequence, correct? Now, I don't want you to stand up. I don't want you to stand up. But if I asked you to stand up, okay? If I asked you to stand up and come down here, across this nice open area here, and I were to rank you, put you in a logical order or sequence by your height only, okay? So he would be down at that end. The tall guys would be over here on this end with me, right? And everybody in between, right? So I'm going to put you in a rank, a logical order sequence by height only, correct? Now, I don't ask trick questions. Once I have put everybody in this room in a rank, order, logical sequence by height only, what two things have I proven scientifically? It's not a trick question. I have proved two things scientifically. I'll take them in any order. What two things have I just proved? Excuse me?
Some people are tall, some people are short.
Okay, well, I'll say that answer is okay, but if you don't mind, I'll put it in a slightly different way. I mean, not to say that you're wrong, okay? I have just proved that people come in different heights. Yeah. I mean, that's what you said. I just put it in a different way. And what is the second and only other thing I have just proven? No, it's not the criteria. No, what I just proved is I have the intelligence to do it. Hello? I have proven that people come in different heights, and I have the intelligence to do this. Now, in science, we always do the same experiment a second time, and so in this case, we're going to do the same thing. I would ask you to stand up, and I'll come down here, but this time, I'm going to change the criteria. This time, I'm going to put you in a rank by the month and the day of the month you were born, okay? I don't care how old you are. I don't care how tall you are. Just, not the year. Just the month and the day of the month that you were born. So I'm going to start over there with January the 1st. I will arrange you in 12 months, and then I will rearrange you for the day of the month until we get to December 31 over here, right? Now, please tell me, once I've arranged everybody in the room by the month and day of the month that they were born, what two things have I proven scientifically? Okay, come on, guys. The first one is a gimme. That I have the intelligence to do it. Thank you very much. And the other?
Everybody's born on different days.
There you go. I have just proven, and again, slightly rewording it for scientific purposes, but I have just proven that people are born on different days of the year. Right? Now, please tell me, did I prove anything about your heritage? Did I prove that any two of you are married? To each other, that is. Did I prove that any two in this room are father and son? Mother and daughter? Aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, or cousins? No. The proof by ranking proves absolutely nothing about heritage. Hello? But it is their favorite method of proof. And I want to make sure they never deceive you again, okay? Now, I don't bet. Please understand that. I don't bet. I have a proposition, okay? You understand the difference here, right? You give me the skull of 1,000 real different animals, okay? So you give me the skull of a chimpanzee, the skull of an elephant, the skull of a dog, rat, etc., right? One real skull of 1,000 different real animals. And I will pick and choose, and I will put the skulls in a logical sequence, and I will prove to you that apes did not evolve into people. What really happened was apes evolved into giraffes. Or I will pick and choose skulls, put them in a logical order or sequence, and prove to you that apes did not evolve into people. What really happened was apes evolved into whales. You let me pick and choose, and I'll make it look that way. Don't ever let them deceive you again. Hello?
Give me an amen on that one.
Thank you, my dear. I appreciate that. I do. And again, this is magic. It's stage magic. It is illusion. How many of you have seen modern computer-generated, as they say, movies where you have seen people turn into animals and animals turn into people, correct? Yes. And you have to admit that today it's so good that it looks real on the screen. At least you can buy into it for the purposes of the plot, you know. But today it really does look really good, you know. I mean, this is not 1938 claymation anymore, right? You know, this is really good stuff. But think with me for just a second. When an evolutionist says to you, here's the skull of a gibbon, a chimpanzee, an orangutan, a gorilla, and a human, and they say to you, you see how one evolved into the other. Think with me. If you make a special effects movie in your head and you fill in the blanks with your own imagination, you can see it. Hello? Yeah. If you fill in the blanks with your own imagination, you can see it. But what is the correct answer? No. I see 5 skulls lined up by size and shape, but that proves nothing that one came from the other. And don't ever let them deceive you again. Now, with that in mind, I have a great question. Dr. Grady, I only ask the great questions. So, which proof by ranking is the one we're supposed to believe is correct? Did you hear that? I have a collection of about 3 dozen of these. I just want to show you a couple just to give you the idea. Now, this comes from the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. Now, remember, Mr. Smithson in England gave the money to start the Smithsonian, and it's entirely 110% evolutionary. Everything in the Smithsonian is evolution. When I went to high school in Washington, D.C., I used to take a bus down to the Smithsonian. I went to the Museum of Natural History, and I just immersed myself in evolution. I loved it. It was wrong, but I loved it. Hello? And this comes from the Smithsonian, and here we see an illustration of a proof by ranking. Now, I'll just tell you a couple of quick things about it, and then we are going to debunk the whole thing. So first of all, on the right, this is the present. So the present is on the right. And then we go back in time towards the left in 1 million year supposed increments, right? So that's today, and then going back 6 million supposed years here, right? Now, you see the solid bars, correct? Each of those bars represents a creature and the time it supposedly existed. When it came into existence, became extinct, and next to each one is a name for each one. And for example, this one, Australopithecus afarensis. Anybody know that one? Okay.
Something.
Actually, it means dead southern ape from the region of Afar, which is a region in Africa. But do you know it by its common name? Lucy. Ah, well, that's Lucy. Afarensis. And so we have the solid bars representing supposedly the times during which these creatures lived, coming into existence and becoming extinct. Well, that's all you need to know to debunk this whole thing. Now, we together can debunk this, but since I'm up here, shall I go first? Sure. Thank you. Now, did you happen to notice that the solid bars are connected with dotted lines? Now, why do we connect things with dotted lines? Possibility. I like that. See, we use dotted lines when we are trying to show a relationship that we think might be, but we can't prove. Is that correct? I think that was very good. And so notice that everything up here is connected with dotted lines. If we could prove that one came from the other, wouldn't the solid lines touch? But no solid lines touch. Is that correct? They're all connected with dotted lines. Another thing. Did you happen to notice the question marks? Now let's count the question marks. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 question marks. Boy, doesn't that strike confidence in you? Come on, 5 question marks. Hello? Oh. Yeah, but I got another one for you. Did you happen to notice these 2 and these 3? Now, there are dotted lines, but you notice the question mark right there, correct? But notice these 2 have no dotted lines connecting them to any of this. Is that correct? And did you notice these 3? Well, they have no dotted lines connecting them over here. Is that correct? So you know they don't connect. Is that right? Then why are those 5 there?
They put them there.
If you don't know the right answer, please repeat just one word after me. Please repeat the word filler. Come on, say it loud, say it proud. Filler. Why are those 5 there? Because they needed filler. If you take those 5 away, then there's less supposed evidence for human evolution. Again, this is stage magic. It is illusion to try to get you to believe there's more evidence than they actually have. Hello? And then, too, there are actually 2 proofs by ranking illustrated here. So my question is, which one is actually the right one? Because they're showing us 2 at the same time. Because if you'll notice, if you start with people here, you could go back this way to get to here, but then you don't know where it came from. Or you could start here and go this way, but you still don't know where it came from, right? So there's actually 2 different proof by rankings here. So which of the 2 are we supposed to believe is right? And then I'd like to share a little new information with you. You see, back in 2013, so we're talking 12 years ago, right? Evolutionists at the highest level suddenly realized that all 5 of these were one kind, just slight variations, just like there are variations between all of us in this room. And that these are actually all one the same creature, and today are now lumped, all 5 of them, as Homo erectus. But what's Homo erectus? Come on, folks, it's that circular garbage can, right? Yeah, so they lumped all 5 as one because they realized it was just variations of a kind, and then put them all in the circular filing cabinet. In one day, they lost 4 supposed intermediates. How y'all doing? I love doing this stuff. I don't know about you. I hope you're getting as much kick out of it as I am. But I have another one for you. Now, this one I have to explain a little bit. Now, the other one was, right, left. Unfortunately, this one, which was done by evolutionists, is up and down. And it was so big that what I had to do was cut it in half and put one piece next to the other to get everything where you could see it. Because if I just showed it to you, it'd be so small you couldn't see it. So if you think about it, this is today. That's now. And then we go down in million-year increments here. And then you see these 4 right here are those 4 right there. So this connects there and then continues on back down in time, right? So just to understand that. Because if I showed it to you without doing this, it'd be such fine print, you'd have to be a lawyer. So now, notice, here we have solid bars. And we have the names of the creatures it's supposed to represent. And again, this is afarensis. That's Lucy right there, right? Now, you now know everything you need to know to debunk this entire thing. First of all, notice the things are connected with dotted lines, correct? Right. Number 2, did you notice the question marks? And let's count. How many question marks are there? Well, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 question marks. Boy, doesn't that just strike confidence in you? Come on, 12 question marks, really, And then, notice right here, these 4. So that's these 4 right here, right? So these 4 are these 4, but there are no dotted lines connecting them to people. So what are they doing there? Come on, say it loud, say it proud. It's filler. Obviously shouldn't even be there, correct? It's illusion. But I wondered if you happened to notice carefully. Did you notice there are no dotted lines connecting these three to any of them? There's no dotted lines connecting them right here. They don't even know if they do connect. Is that right? Huh. How about that? And I remind you that back in 2013, they reclassified all of these as one. Well, I'd like to show you one more. I have mentioned that I was born in San Francisco but grew up on the campus of Cal Berkeley. This comes from my beloved University of California, Berkeley. It comes from their website. And here you see kind of like the first time, okay? So here, well, this is today on the right. Then going back in 1 million year increments going back 6 million years, correct? Now, in the illustration here, you see skulls. Isn't that nice? They decorated this one. Come on, it's got skulls, isn't it? Come on, that's neat, isn't it? And again, we have bars showing when each one is supposed to have lived, correct? And again, that's Lucy, that's Afarensis, right? But I wondered if you'd noticed that the evolutionists at Berkeley were so honest, they didn't even put in dotted lines. Hello? Oh. And I want to point something out to you. Did you notice that back here, 6 million years ago, supposedly, chimpanzees broke off of the human line of evolution and went that way? Hello? You can see it, right? Right there it says chimpanzees went that way and aren't even on the human line. Is that correct?
Right.
Aha. Now let me share you some information that might be of interest to you. In 2011, in Science magazine, Science Journal, that is the second highest scientific journal in the world for evolutionists, they announced that they were wrong, that chimpanzees had not broken off of the human line of evolution 6 million years ago. Actually, well, chimpanzees had broken off 13 million years ago. Come on, folks. In one day, they moved the separation of chimpanzees from people by 7 million supposed years. Apparently, you just don't see the humor in that. And I remind you, again, back in 2013, they grouped all of these together, correct? Well, we are drawing close to the time that I said you wanted to stay. Now, please take a look at this Time magazine cover, and I can assure you this is the real thing. You can look it up on the internet yourself if you don't believe me. But that's Time magazine cover, and it says right up there, October 9, 2006. It says that right up there. And remember, Time magazine is one of the single biggest propagandizers of evolution in the world, behind National Geographic, Discovery, etc., but one of the biggest propagandizers of evolution. And on the front cover here, we see a human baby and a young chimpanzee, correct? And on the cover, it says, How We Became Human, correct? Now, back in 2006, I was walking in an airport past a magazine rack. And I'm a trained observer. I can see things walking full speed most people don't even pay any attention to. And so I'm walking down this hall, passing this magazine rack. My eye caught this cover, and I stopped in 2 steps, came back, and took another look. Now, maybe you can't see it, but those that are up front can tell you that I'm telling you the truth. What it says down here, I'm going to show you this over here. That's exactly what it says here. It says, chimps and humans share almost 99% of their DNA. New discoveries reveal how we can be so alike and yet so different. And that's what it says right there. Hello? Now, I looked at that cover, and I got angry. And I mean, I got real angry. But the Bible says you can be angry and sin not. Is that correct? Because it's a righteous anger. And I got righteously angry. First of all, I knew it was a lie. It is a flat, bold-faced lie. So I went home and put together the material I'm about to show you. Now, I'm only showing you a very brief summary, a few bullet points. But today I have 66 reasons why it's not true. And we're not going to go through all of them. Hello? Come on. And everybody said, yeah. Now, I have boiled it down to just 4 pages of bullet points, and so we're going to start. First of all, do apes and people share 96 to 99% the same DNA? Now, first of all, you've all heard this. I mean, you've all heard. I'm not saying you believe it, right? But you've all heard this kind of stuff, right? Now, first of all, there was never any scientific proof for the 99% the same. They actually just made it up. They invented it. There was never any science behind that. But I am going to show you the science. Now, bullet point number 1. Similarity may come from a common ancestor. That would be evolution. But similarity may also come from a common designer, creator, God, right? So similarity may come from a common ancestor or a common creator, God, designer, correct? So at this point, we're on a balance beam. And at this point, from a philosophical standpoint, they're equal. But now let's see which one is true. Point 2. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes, but gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, and orangutans have 24 pairs. So apes have an extra pair of chromosomes that we don't even have. In addition to that, there are 689 extra genes in humans that apes don't have. Hello? Well, let's keep going. Point 3, the Y chromosomes. The Y chromosome is what makes a boy a boy. Hello? So women have 2 X chromosomes, men have 1 X and 1 Y chromosome. And the Y is what makes a guy, right? Now, oh, by the way, remember I said yesterday that if I had something that I thought was particularly interesting to the ladies, I would mention it. And for the guys, I would mention it, right? Now, tonight I have something for the guys, right? Remember, women have 2 X chromosomes, and we have 1 X and 1 Y, correct? Guys, this is why women are a doubly unknown quantity to men. Come on, X is an unknown quantity, and they got 2. Hello? However, the Y chromosomes of men and male chimpanzees, or apes, is radically different. You see, I am quoting here, and I give the citations down here. This comes from Nature magazine. Nature magazine is the single highest scientific journal for evolutionists in the world. If you are an evolutionist and you can get your article published in Nature, you have made the A list. Hello? I am quoting, the Y chromosomes of apes and humans are horrendously different from each other. Guys, we are more than 58% different than male chimpanzees. You see, human males have 60 genes for gender, but chimps that are males only have 25. And we are horrendously different in the gender genes. Now, ladies, I'm sorry, you're a little closer to apes. But you're still 31% different, all right? So you're only 69% the same. But you're still 31% different. Hello? Then, point 4, the chimpanzee genome is 11.5% larger than the human genome. They have 3.35 billion base pairs. We only have 3 billion. But again, I remind you, humans can vary up to 4.5%, and you're still human. So we don't all have the same amount of it, and you can vary by up to 4.5%, and you're still totally normal human, no problem whatsoever, right? Now, I just got back from doing mission work in England 6 weeks ago. And I love going to England. I've been going to England about 35 years, and I love going to England because they actually speak English. You know, we don't speak English. We speak American. Hello? It's an ancient dialect. But I love going there because they speak real English. I just love it. And the English they have an expression. I just love this expression. When you talk about things, they say, well, let's do the maths. That's the English expression. Let's do the maths. Meaning, let's do the mathematics. Now, please tell me, if their genome is 11.5% larger than our genome, then how can we only be 1% different? Let's do the maths. Hello? Well, that was page 1. Page 2. In the year 2000, now remember that's 6 years before the Time magazine article, right? In the year 2000, evolutionists already knew the difference between apes and people was down to 95.2. It wasn't 99 in 2000. They just invented that number, but by 2000, we didn't know the ape genome, and we only had partial parts of the human genome. And just in comparing the partial with basically nothing, they already knew we were only 95.2 similar. Well, the Human Genome Project was completed in April of 2003. That's when we found out the entire human genome. But we still didn't know the ape genome. Now remember that there are only 4 DNA bases, which means that all life on Earth is 25% the same. Hello? When you compare using genetics, you don't start at 0. You start at 25, because all life on Earth shares 25% the same DNA. I don't care whether you're a plant, animal, insect, people, we all have 25% the same DNA. There are just some things that are necessary for life. You with me? Remember that genetic similarity does not produce spiritual equivalency either, correct? Ah, thank you. Well, page 3. I want to introduce you to Dr. Jerry Bergman. I was with him just a couple of summers ago. Dr. Jerry Bergman is one of the great researchers in creation science. This guy has 2 PhDs and 9 other degrees. Now, I've got 3 doctorates and 2 other degrees, but this guy intimidates me. Hello? I'm serious. But he's a biologist and a microbiologist. That's his field. Now, he looked at a catalog of every single known mutation in plants, animals, and people. And he found approximately 500,000 cataloged mutations. Now, first, what is a mutation? In science, a mutation means copying error. Copying error. Now, I can disprove evolution right here, right now. I mentioned the book we have out there, Genetic Entropy, but that's the details of this. But just think with me, copying error. You can disprove evolution, and I don't even have to spend $1. Think with me for a minute. A mutation is a copying error. Now, what if I were to go to this young lady right here? Now, we all know this young lady. She's a stalwart, upright member of the community, never told a lie in her entire life, and don't say a word. Now, I'm going to tell her a story for 5 minutes that nobody else in the room can hear. I will now ask you verbatim, every single word, exactly as I told the story to you, to her. And you're going to tell her, and she's going to tell her, then him, then him, then him. Now, when I get down there, and I ask him to repeat the story that I told her, how many of you will agree I won't even recognize the country it occurred in? What happened to the story? Copying errors. Now think about what occurs in genetics. In genetics, we copy mama and papa, and we pass it on into the next generation in new combinations of information, but never new information. Did you hear that? So we take the previously existing information, copy mama, papa, we pass it on into the next generation in new combinations, but never new information. Now, you can only copy things 2 ways. The first way, you can copy things perfectly. Is that correct? And if you copy them perfectly, there is no change, correct? What is the only other way you can copy something? What was that? If you can either copy it perfectly or imperfectly. And mutations always go downhill. Now, sometimes you have what are called neutral mutations. Today they call them functional mutations, but you might have grown up with the term neutral. But some mutations are not identical, but they don't really change anything effectively. For instance, if you were to spell the woman's name Anna, A-N-N-A, if you substitute the A's, you'd still have the same message. Or substitute the N's, you'd still have the same message. But you wouldn't have copied it perfectly. But ultimately, over the long run, everything goes downhill. But evolutionists believe that mutations are the only thing that causes change from one species to another. It's impossible. But he found almost 500,000 known mutations. And he found that 99.6% of them were lethal. He only found 186 of them that were not detrimental. They were mutations, but they weren't detrimental. But 99.96% of all mutations are harmful or lethal. Now, evolutionists want you to believe that mutations are what cause progressive evolution. Simply impossible. Point 9. Humans and chimps only make 29% the same proteins. Did you hear that? 71% of our actual proteins are different. And if you've ever heard anything about junk DNA, today we know there's no such thing. The DNA is all functional unless it's been destroyed. Point 10. Considering the whole genome of the humans known in 2003, but we still didn't know the whole genome of the apes. In 2003, the comparison was down to 86.7. I'm quoting from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, USA, the highest authority in the United States, equal to the Russian Academy of Science. Hello? Did you notice the more we know we're different? Hello? Well, last page. Please notice Point 11, considering the whole genomes, which were known, ape and human, in September of 2005, the number was down to 80.6. Now remember, that is 13 months before Time magazine published that it was only 1%. Do you think that Time magazine maybe didn't care to know the truth? That maybe they had an agenda? Hello? Oh yeah. Because 13 months before they published, it was already down to 80.6, and I want to bring you up to date. This number is not going to change. In 2013, the number was down to 70% similar. You are only 70% similar to primates when it comes to the DNA, but that is equal to 900 million DNA differences. That's a hunk. Hello? But I said if you would come and stay for the last 10 minutes, you're going to go out, shake my hand, and thank me for getting you here, right? Now, I want you to know, based on this, absurd method of comparing things, that you are 50% the same as a banana. I don't know about you, I find that appealing. And it begs the question, when you put bananas on your cereal in the morning, is that half cannibalism? Excuse me? But the last time I looked, a banana is it's a plant, right? But your DNA is 50% the same as a banana. But again, before you leave here tonight, I want you to know that you are, using this absurd method of comparison, you are 35% the same as a daffodil. Or if you prefer, narcissus. It's the same plant with two different names. But you are the same as a daffodil or a narcissus by 35% being the same. Which is kind of biblical because you're supposed to bloom where you're planted, right? Right? Oh. Okay. Well, again, using this absurd method of proof, I want you to also know that you are 88% the same as a rat. What? You are genetically 88% the same as a rat. But you're only 70% the same as an ape. Oh, come on, folks. At least a rat's a mammal. Hello? Well, I'm not finished. I want you to know that using this absurd method of proof that you are also 60% the same as a chicken. Well, you got to wonder, right? I mean, down south we call it the gospel bird, but that's a fried chicken. You know what the belt is around a minister, don't you? You don't know what a belt is around a minister? It's a fence around a chicken graveyard. Hello? So when you eat chicken, is that kind of cannibalism? I mean, well, it's just a thought. Now, I also want you to know that using this absurd method of comparison that you are 70% the same as a sea sponge. Yeah, you are 70% the same as a sea sponge, which does kind of make me wonder, maybe, just maybe, we really are related. But let's think. You're the 70% the same as an ape, and you're 70% the same as a sea sponge, right? But I am not finished. I want you to know before you leave here tonight that you are 88% the same as a sea squirt. Apparently you don't know what a sea squirt is. Oh, well, let me show you what a sea squirt is. That's what they look like. Now, what is a sea squirt? Technically, it is defined as an animal. And when it's a young sea squirt, it swims through the water as a young sea squirt in the ocean and so forth, near shores. But when it becomes an adult, it attaches to the sea floor. It converts into a filter feeder like corals and sponges, and the brain dissolves away. As an adult, it doesn't have a brain. Now, let's think about this for a second. You're 70% the same as an ape. You're 70% the same as a sea sponge, but you're 88% the same as a rat, and 88% the same as a sea squirt. So before Pastor comes to close us out, I would like to ask you the question. So which one are you closer to? And you answer that for yourself, Pastor.